This conference will now be recorded.
Hi friends, good evening. In this Business Intelligence Master Program, so in today's session we are going to talk about BA Master Program Interview Questions Part 1. So in this Part 1 I am going to discuss some of the interview questions, and I am going to take you one more session on interview questions where we are going to cover remaining interview questions. Okay, fine. Let's see. So first question that you are going to see is, tell me about yourself. They will also ask you, can you just explain me about your project? So this is the 99.999% you will get this particular question. Okay, even you can say 100%, because even if they are not asking you to explain this particular project details, when they ask you to introduce yourself, you need to introduce yourself. Then as a continuation, you need to explain about your current project. Okay, so whenever you are explaining Azure project, you need to consider 3 steps. So where we will have our data, we are going to collect data from the different devices. Let's say whenever you make a payment in Google Pay, Phone Pay, there is a transaction. From net banking, there is a transaction, right? So next, when you place your order from Flipkart or Amazon, whatever website, okay, so that is a one transaction details, order details. Next, when you go with any transport, right? Suppose if you are booking for any ticket, maybe flight ticket, bus ticket, or whatever ticket, so then that particular ticket information we are going to store it. Let's say if you go to any hospital, big hospital, they are going to take your entire data. So that healthcare related data, right? So likewise, in each and every department that you can able to think of, everywhere, even if you go to Reliance store for purchasing your items, right, they are going to take, if you are new user, if you don't have, you have not registered in their system, they will ask you to tell your phone number, they will ask you your name, right? So ultimately in each and every domain we have a web applications. So by using web applications, we will do some transactions, maybe purchasing a item, maybe you are transferring amount, like booking a flight ticket or whatever ticket. Okay, all these are basically will generate some data. This data we are going to store it in a on-premise system, client location, because cloud is recently came. But as of today, people are storing data in on-premise. Now once we have data collected in on-premise, that data we need to bring into the cloud. So in cloud, we have seen how you can move data into the blob storage, how to move data into data lake storage, gen 1 data lake storage, gen 2 SQL database, SQL data warehouse, all those things. Cosmos DB also we have seen, right? So okay, so what we need to understand, how to copy this data from on-premise to the cloud. This is the first step in your project. You need to explain to the interviewer. When you are explaining to the interviewer, you also need to tell him what all the on-premise sources you are connecting. We already talked about, we learned different sources, right? So from different sources, how to pull data. It may be like, it may be your own on-premise, it may be on-premise source, or it can be any other cloud source. Example, we have seen how to copy data from on-premise file system, on-premise SQL Server, REST API, Snowflake, Salesforce, AWS S3. So we have seen from different storages and databases how you can fetch data and load it into the Azure storages or Azure databases. And when you are loading this data, there are two types of loads. Can somebody tell me what are the two types of loads we discussed?
Full
Sequential and
load,
parallel.
full load and delta.
Very good. So full load and incremental load. Okay, full load and incremental load. Very good. So we discussed about full load and incremental load. You need to tell to the interviewer clearly, we have, these are the on-premise sources, or you can say these are the my sources from which we are getting data and loading into the Azure storage or Azure SQL database, as per whatever you explain. But we have already discussed multiple sources, from multiple sources how to get data into the cloud. by using Azure Data Factory. That's what we discussed. So we have a lot of people. What you people should do is you can decide your own, because if I explain, if I take an example of one source and given to you, what you will do, you just explain same thing to the interviewer. So if one or two people, our people only, whoever is taken training from me, if you people went to the interview, what happens, you will explain same flow, there will be a problem. So that's why what you need to do, you need to decide whatever you practice, you select those sources and tell that you are bringing data, you are copying data from those sources into the Azure storages. Okay, so when you are copying data into Azure storages, you are storing in a two ways. One is a full load and second one is a incremental load. Okay, these are the two types of loads we are using to copy data from on-premise to the cloud, or you can say from any other source to the cloud. Okay, that is our first step. You see, brief explain me about your project means on-premise to cloud. We have migrated. What are the on-premise sources? You can decide. So where you have loaded data into cloud, you can decide, because we ultimately learned each and everything, isn't it? Next. So now the data is available in a cloud storage. It may be data like storage, into blob storage, wherever it is. Now I want to create my daemon. Let's say first I want to do data quality checks. I want to remove duplicates. I want to remove the null values. If enter row is null or something, I want to remove that. Next, I want to check whether date is proper format or not. Date is in a proper format or not. If the date is not in a proper format, I want to reject such type of records. These kind of data quality checks I need to perform. How you are going to do? You read data from the storage or database, apply these kind of data quality checks, and write your resultant data back to the cloud storage itself or cloud database itself, instead of writing to somewhere else. Okay, so our second step is to read data from cloud and perform some data quality checks such as duplicate checks, time format, null checks, load it into the cloud. Okay, that is what we are going to do, cloud to cloud with the data quality checks. So this is what we do in real time also. Our final step is, we already learned different ways to implement std1 with hash function we have used to generate hash values, and we also use surrogate key, how to implement the std1 with surrogate key. Okay, so we are going to understand how to implement this. Yeah, so the third thing is how to implement these dimensions. So you have performed data quality checks, you know we have a good data in cloud storage. You read that particular good data and create your dimensions, dimension 1, SCD type 1, SCD type 2, which we have discussed in detail. Mostly we have 19% people will implement SCD1 and SCD2. Okay, so once we have dimensions available, we are going to create the facts. Facts is basically, you will just use derive column, and as per the business logic, you are going to apply those logics. Okay, so that's how finally we will have we need to create the dimensions and facts. These dimensions and facts, we need to load it into the data warehouse, Azure Synapse. You can say Azure SQL data warehouse. Here also, maybe after performing data quality checks, we have data in your cloud, maybe data like storage gen to read that data, create dimensions, load it into your Azure Synapse, Azure SQL data warehouse. So that's what we have done already. We have loaded our dimensions into data warehouse. We have learned that. Okay, by using Polybase, we have loaded data into Azure SQL data warehouse. So this is also cloud to cloud with dimensions and facts. Okay, so these are the three steps that you need to explain to the interviewer to complete your project to flow. Bring data from on-premise into cloud. So in the cloud, you do the data quality checks, reject bad records, write good records to the another folder in same cloud storage. Again, read the good records, do like create dimensions, load these dimensions into data warehouse. Again, read these dimensions for creating the facts. Finally, load these facts to the data warehouse. So how many of you clear on this? Okay, so fine. So if you're not clear, you will get more clarity. Now see real-time use case with finance domain. Let's say in finance, we have net banking, mobile app, Google Pay, Phone Pay. So there are different applications which will generate data. That data I'm storing in on-premise, maybe on-premise SQL server, maybe any file storage, any file system. In file system, maybe ORC files, Parquet, Avro. It can be any type of file I can have, CSV, JSON, or whatever. So maybe I can have directly dimensions available in my data warehouse, on-premise data warehouse I may have. So example, Snowflake. Snowflake is a kind of a data warehouse, right? So where we have all dimensions, we have already learned how to move data from Snowflake to the data in the Snowflake to the Azure data lake storage Gen2, isn't it? So ultimately, even if you have data warehouse, on-premise data warehouse, you can move data from on-premise data warehouse to the cloud. But what is the necessary step that you need to do to connect to the on-premise from ADF is what you need to do. We discuss like anything. Everybody should aware of this. What we have done to connect to the on-premise.
Azure integration and no. Self-hosted integration.
Integrate the strings.
So even though you practiced, I know like names will confuse you, names you will forget when interviewer asked you, because you are listening all these things since last 2.5-3 months, right? So people like used to forget all these things. So what you need to do, you need to learn, like note down somewhere. That's why I have given all these questions for you to give the answers first. Then I'm going to explain, right? That's what I told, but I don't know how many of you prepare the answers for these questions. That's okay. Now you see, maybe data can be there in anywhere in on-premise. Now I need to move this data into cloud. Okay, so how I will move into cloud is by using ADF. I will move data into cloud. In cloud, it can be data lake storage Gen1, blob storage, data lake storage Gen2, SQL database, SQL data warehouse. We have learned how to move data into different databases, different storage. Once the data is available here, we already learned by using data flows how we can transform, load it into again maybe data lake storage Gen2 or SQL data warehouse. But apart from data flows, we can also use Azure Databricks. Okay, we already completed how to connect to the blob storage from Databricks, all those things, right? A few more things left. Those things we are going to discuss in next week, right? So ultimately, we are going to connect to these storages for reading data and doing like you can just do data quality checks, whatever you want to implement, whatever you have done in data flows, everything you can able to do it in a Databricks by using Spark. So once Databricks has done those things, it will load data into data lake storage, or it can load data into data warehouse. Some people, they will load data into data lake storage by using external tables, data warehouse external tables. People will read data from the data lake storage. Okay. Next, so maybe you can use Azure HD Insight, any other processing data like analytics. You can use different analytical services to process this data, and finally you can load it into Azure Synapse, Azure Data Warehouse. You can say, okay, you can load it into Azure Data Warehouse or Blob Storage. Once the data is available here, so data by using Azure SQL Data Warehouse, we will read this data. Okay, external table we will create. This external table will read data from the blob storage and data lake storage basically. So whatever, or doesn't matter where is your data, but ultimately this data will go to the reporting. Reporting, maybe you can use a Power BI or Tableau, ClickView, whatever you want to use, you can. Okay, so this is the same flow you will have for all the domains. Let's say retail domain, you will have Flipkart, Amazon, Alibaba, Snapdeal. So you have multiple websites which will generate data and load it into on-premise. By using ADF, I will move it into cloud. In cloud, you can load it into some storage or DBMS. By using Databricks, process it, load it into data lake storage. By using Azure HD Insight, also you can process and load it into blob storage in the Azure Synapse. Again, you can use a Power BI, any other visualization tools or reporting tools you can use to create the reports. Even if you go with the travel, right? So RTC, we have Make My Trip, Redbus, Thomas Cook. So EaseMyTrip. So there are a lot of websites we have which will generate data into on-premise. Maybe in on-premise they will use a different storage. Move data into cloud by using ADF. In cloud we are going to use different storages. Again, process data by using Databricks, Azure HD Insight. So once the data is processed, data is available in Azure Synapse, you can create the reports by using Power BI. Okay. So same steps, healthcare, you can say Webisina, Smart Patients, Medline Plus. So there are different websites which will collect the data from the people. So what they will do, they will load it into cloud for processing. Once they process data, they will load data into any storage or Azure Synapse. So final data will be created with the help of final data. We are going to create the reports. Okay, so you consider any domain. Okay, you consider any domain. The functionality, the flow of project is mostly similar to what we have discussed now. So you just have to replace what storages we have used in on-premise, what storages you are selecting in cloud. Okay, but ultimately you are using ADF and data flows, ADF activities and data flows to do all these things. Okay, but if you are good at Azure Databricks, you can say Azure Databricks. Okay, but we already learned Azure Databricks as well. You can just tell Azure Databricks. Any questions? That is all about your first question, which is very important. Okay, so because the 100%, not 99.99, so 100% people will ask that particular question. Any questions? Everybody is clear? Can you confirm? Whoever is clear, can you confirm chat window? Okay, fine. Let's move on now. So how to automate pipelines? How we were automating pipelines? We know, right? We have triggers in pipeline which we can use to run pipeline without manual execution. Okay, to make pipeline run automation, what we can do is we can able to use something called triggers concept in your ADF. How many different ways we can able to automate this pipeline is there are 3 types of triggers we have. By using these 3 types we can able to automate these pipelines. First one is event trigger. Event trigger means whenever some file came into blob storage or data lake storage into, we can run our pipelines. Schedule trigger, I want to run maybe a daily 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, something like that. You can just put schedule trigger, isn't it? On weekdays or months, days, we have multiple ways. Okay, but tumbling window trigger is especially designed for loading your historical data, backfill data, or and to maintain the dependency. We discussed each and everything in detail. Tumbling window, we discussed how you can create the dependency, how you can use tumbling window for processing your backfill data. That is nothing but your historical data. Let's say my data, I have data from 2010, I want to process it. You just create tumbling window from 2010. You just say I want to load every 24 hours of data. So you can use 50 parallel threads, right? So that 50 windows it can able to process at once. So we discussed each and everything in detail. So now let's see event based trigger, which is used for event based like file arrive, sorry, spelling mistake, arrive and file deleted in blob storage. We are going to use the event based trigger. It's a many to many relationship with pipeline, meaning one event based trigger can be attached to a multiple pipelines. One pipeline can have a multiple event based triggers. One trigger attached to a multiple pipelines. One pipeline can have a multiple triggers. That is nothing but an event based trigger all about. Next, schedule trigger. Using a schedule triggers, we can schedule pipeline to run at specified time. We can rerun pipeline in case of failure. Even we can run every minute. So first you try to understand schedule trigger we are going to use to run pipeline for particular time. Second things, schedule trigger we can use to run a pipeline for every minute. Even if the pipeline is failed, you have a choice of rerunning the pipeline. Next, it's a many to many relationship with pipeline schedule trigger also. Let's go with tumbling trigger. We can use this. Yeah, we can schedule pipeline. That is nothing but we can schedule this particular pipeline with tumbling triggers. We cannot rerun pipeline in case of failure. If you are using tumbling trigger, you cannot rerun the failure triggers, failure pipelines, and we cannot run pipeline for every minute. So it's not possible to run every minute. At least minimum 5 minutes interval we need to maintain. We can process historical data and can maintain a dependency between triggers. Let's say if pipeline 1 is succeeded, then I want to trigger this pipeline to such type of triggers dependency you can able to create it. Next, this particular pipeline previous run is succeeded, then only I want to run the next one. So self-dependency trigger also you can able to maintain. It's a one-to-one mapping with pipeline, meaning one tumbling window, if you create that tumbling window will be attached to a one pipeline only. If the pipeline is attached with one tumbling window trigger, you cannot use another tumbling trigger. Okay. This is all about how to automate pipelines, how to schedule, or whatever people will ask. People may ask in different questions. What is the difference between schedule trigger and tumbling window trigger, event trigger and schedule trigger? So you should be in a position to answer all those questions. Next, what are the top level concepts or main components in Azure Data Factory? First one is pipeline. It acts as a carrier in which we have various processes taking place. Maybe first you collect all the table list, pass it to the for each. For each will pass one by one table. Inside for each, you take one by one table and copy from one storage to another storage or whatever you do. So this entire process, okay. So in this particular pipeline, various processes happening. First process, reading entire table list. Second process, giving that table list one by one. Third process, copying one tables one by one. Okay, there are three processes are happening. Okay, remember this individual process is called a activity. Each individual process is called a activity. So for that, for reading entire table list, we are using lookup activity. For iterating through this collection, we are using for each activity. Inside for each activity, we are using copy activity to copy data. Okay. Next, activities. Activities represent the processing step in a pipeline. Okay, processing step, what it is doing. A pipeline can have one or more activities. You can say one or multiple activities. It can be anything. That is, process like querying a data set or moving a data set from one source to another. So we already seen. So entire table we can select. Maybe you just query it on a data set and fetch based on your conditions in a query. So that's how we are getting some data and copying data, right? So based on different conditions, based on different activities, as per our requirement, you can do a different things. Data sets. Source of data, in simple words, it is a data structure that holds our data. So it tells you whether you are reading a JSON data, whether you are reading Excel data, whether you are reading CSV data, Parquet, what kind of data you are reading. That is what it is going to tell, whether you are reading any table or DBMS table. So data set will tell you that. Linked service is basically a connection string. So before you read data, you should have a access. Okay. So suppose before you place order, you should log in. From your account you can able to place order. You cannot place order from somebody else's account, right? So that's why connection string is very important before you access any data, before you put any data in any website, right? So that's why a linked service is a connection string which will help you to connect to the different sources. Okay, any questions still here?
Clear, Malay.
Thank you. Let's move on. So how to handle incremental data in ADF? And for this particular requirement, what are the activities we have used? Isn't now you see, with the help of last processed value or watermark value from watermark table, we can fetch only incremental data from source and copy into sync. What it means? Let's say I have 1 to 10 records. Now I just copied all the 10 records. I'll just take a ID number 10. This I can call it as a last processed value because still 10th record I copied. This 10th value I just kept. You can keep it in a metadata table itself, or if you want to maintain a separate table called watermark table, you can keep it. Okay. So once we have this last processed value, second time when you are reading the data, you are going to say select star from this table where ID greater than 10, meaning I don't want to select the first 10 records. Whatever records came after this 10, those records I want to take. So I'll just take those records and copy into the sync. Okay, that's how I'm going to copy my incremental data. So copy is successful, then we need to update last processed value. Okay, let's say I have 5 records newly came. So 10 to like 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 records. Now I just fetched greater than 10 records, meaning 11 to 15 records I just copied into my sync. Now what I need to do, I need to immediately update my last processed value. Otherwise, next time you are again going to get records from 11. Okay, that's why once copy act is successful, then we need to update last processed value in watermark table. Otherwise, don't update last processed value. Otherwise, don't update last processed value means if copy activity is failed, then we should not update last processed value, meaning 11 to 15 records we have not moved into sync, then we should not update last processed value, isn't it? So when you have successfully copied this 15 records into your sync, then this 15th ID you need to update in your in your watermark table. Okay, clear? Fine. So used activities are lookup 1. So first lookup I will use to get the last processed value from watermark table. Lookup 2 to get the max value from the table. So let's say I have last lookup 1 I'm using to get my ID 10. Lookup 2 I'm using to get maximum ID which I have in my source table, that is 50. Okay, I will use copy activity to execute a select query saying that ID greater than lookup 1 output. Now what I will get, select star from table where ID greater than 10. So I will get records from 11 to 15. Those 11 to 15 I will copy into my sync. Okay, once I copied those records into my sync, then I will use a stored procedure to update. If copy activity successfully executed, I will use stored procedure to update my last processed value as 50. Okay, so that's how we are going to use these 4 activities to do this entire. If it is a single table, but we already learned for multiple tables, what extra you need to do, maybe you just have to use one lookup outside, and for each inside that maybe you need to use all these activities outside. Okay, but you can just reduce these all activities if you have a multiple tables. You just, as per just explain to the interviewer saying that if it is a single table you can do like this. If it is a multiple table you can say you just have to read the collection of tables and iterate through those tables by using for each, insert for each I would use same setup. Okay, next we will see I have a CSV file which contains date in end of the file name. Okay, how would you process files which contains yesterday date in file name? So you remember how we were processing this? We have already done this. Okay, so get metadata used to get list of files in the specified folder. I'm going to use the get metadata activity to get all the file names. Now I am going to use the if condition to filter out the records, to filter out the files which is having a yesterday date as the file name. Yesterday date as the file name. How to generate today date? Today date you can use in a different ways. Current UTC underscore. Now you can use that particular function to generate UTC time. If you want to convert into IST, we have a conversion functions. We have used those two things to convert into IST. Then we need to go to the yesterday date from today. So what you need to do? Add date comma -1. So one day you need to remove from the today date to get the yesterday date. So this yesterday date, with the help of this yesterday date, check with all the file names and filter out whatever file names are ending with yesterday date. Okay, those things we can able to filter out and load it into our destination. Okay, that's how we were able to do all these things. Just to practice all those things we have discussed this particular thing as well, friends. Okay, next, how to improve performance in ADF. Okay, if my pipeline is running slow, what you will do? If my pipeline is running slow, what you will do? First thing what you need to do, data integration units, DIUs, you need to check. Okay, what is the DIUs used in every run? So if it is very slow, try to increase the DIUs and check the performance. If it is not improved, then try to increase the degree of copy parallelism. Okay, so what this parallelism will do, this parallelism, spelling mistake, so what this copy parallelism will do, it will try to take the more threads. Okay, more threads means more process will run. Okay, more like a data copying will happen parallelly with the help of multiple threads. So finally, you can also think whenever you are loading some data into data warehouse and all those things, we have a different options poly base, bulk insert, all those things, right? So based on your requirement, you can also select a bulk insert, which will be very, very fast instead of loading data into the storage, then loading into your data warehouse. Okay, fine. Next, I am copying files based on last modified date. Okay, example, if I want to take all the files which came since last 3 days, not only yesterday files, I just want to get all the files which came in last 3 days. Okay, how would you have, how you will handle these kind of situations without modifying trigger? If you remember, in tumbling trigger we can modify this, right? So we can say just to create a windows from like 3 days back, maybe let's say today date is, what is today date? Today days is 17, right? So I want to process data from 15. So then you can just modify the trigger. But the situation here, the question is, without modifying the tumbling trigger, how you will fetch the last 3 days of data? So for that, in every copy activity, we have seen something called last modified date. We have used in many situations in many classes. Okay, we have done exactly same scenario. I have replicated in one of the class. Okay, so what we have to do, we have to set the last modified date to 3 days back. Okay, you see modified date which sets in a pipeline change it to a 3 days. So okay, let's say we'll have a modified date start time, start date time, and modified uh, end date time, right? So you'll have something like that. So start time, you need to say 3 days back. Let's say if it is 17, you can 16, 15, 14. So 14, the date if you put there. So from 14th onwards, whatever files came, everything it will fetch it. Okay. Even in get metadata activity, you can able to do the same thing. Okay, if you want to copy only the files which came in last 3 days, you need to do this modification copy activity. Next, difference between blob and data lake storage general. So this is very, very important question again. So blob and data lake storage, hard hold, 1 second. Yeah, here you can see blob and data lake storage. So hot and cold storage type. We have something like hot and cold storage type. You, whenever we were creating blob storage, you might have observed. So hot means frequently access data. So you are going to say whatever data I'm storing in this, I'm going to store it in a hot. So what it means is I'm going to access this data frequently. If you select a cold storage type, you are saying data will not be accessed frequently. Okay. So, but this option is available only in blob, but in data lake storage and one we don't have. Redundant storage. So we will have a local redundant, zone redundant, geo redundance, okay, read geo redundance. We have different options in blob, but in data lake storage gen 1 we don't have this option. It should, okay, active directory security. We will get active directory security for data lake storage gen 1, but for blob storage we don't have active directory security. For blob storage we were getting something like access keys. You remember, whenever we are connecting to blob, we are using access keys. Hierarchical namespace. What is hierarchical namespace? So meaning you can have a root folder, under that you can have subfolders, other things. That is not possible in blob because blob is a flat namespace. But data lake storage gen 1 is a hierarchical namespace. You can have a multiple subfolders, all those things. Size limits. Yes, on file size and container size, we have some limit in blob storage. But in data lake storage, there is no limit. There is no such limit. Okay. Okay, clear. Now let's see. So data lake storage Gen 2 and Gen 1 options, the difference. So all these are not a difference. Only two differences we have mainly. Okay. One is hot and cold storage tier, which is available only in data lake storage Gen 2, but in data lake storage Gen 1 we don't have that option. Redundant storage option, which we have in data lake storage Gen 2, but in data lake storage Gen 1 we don't have that option. Azure Active Directory security we have for both hierarchical namespace, both are hierarchical namespace. Size limits, there is no limit for both. Okay, from this you should understand data lake storage Gen 2 is a combination of blob and data lake storage Gen 1. Okay, all the good features from data lake storage Gen 1, all good features of blob storage included in a data lake storage Gen 2. Okay, so that's why most of the people now they are selecting data lake storage Gen 2 for their processing data, for storing data intermediately. Okay, as a staging layer, if they want to use, they are using data lake storage Gen 2. Okay, fine. So what is parameter and variable, and where you used in your project? You know what is parameter? What is parameter and variable? See, variable, maybe we have used set variable activity, append variable activity, isn't it? So we have used append variable activity to append the values to the array variable. We have used the set variable to set the value, particular value to a variable. So if you remember, whenever we want to whenever I was iterating through the different JSON, different REST API URLs, right? So you have a different paginations available in your REST API. So I need to read page by page. For that, I need to pass the pagination number 1, 2, 3. So these numbers I'm setting with the help of something called set variable. We have done that as well. Okay, variables we are going to use inside a pipeline, inside a activity, inside a pipeline. We are going to use these particular variables. But pipelines, parameters are the things which we are going to use externally. Maybe okay, we have used dataset parameter, pipeline parameter, dataset parameter, linked service parameter. We have used different parameters. All these parameters, pipeline parameter values will pass to the dataset parameter we will pass it to the linked service parameters, isn't it? But these parameter values are fixed basically. These are not going to change every time. But variables you can able to change. Once you set pipeline parameter, will you be able to change? No. Okay. Will you be able to change? No. Okay. Variable,
No.
we can able to iterate every time. We can able to iterate every time. Okay. You see. Parameters used to pass values externally at a pipeline level. Okay, at a pipeline level, when you run a pipeline, so pipeline parameter values are fixed. These parameter values you cannot change. If you want to change, you need to change the values. Again, you need to run it. But once you run a pipeline, inside pipeline, set variable values or append variable values will change. Is it at pipeline level? Whereas, okay, see, parameters used to pass values externally at pipeline level, whereas variables we use to store variables which we pass values internally to the pipeline. Okay, internally based on our execution values. Maybe if activity 1 is succeeded, I will set a variable value as 1. Maybe activity is failed, I will set my variable value as 0. Based on this 1 or 0, I will just act on other activities, isn't it? So that's so you can just change the variable values internally, but parameter values are going to change it externally. Okay.
Malaya, for passing dynamic values, we are using parameters, right?
What dynamic parameters?
For dynamic values, instead of going for directly, we have to pass the values. We can use the dynamic values. For that, we can pass the parameter.
Yes, dynamic only we are using. See, here the question is when you will use parameters and when you will use variables. Variables are like, see, variables will keep changing the values. Parameters, once whether you are using a dynamic value, whether you are using hard-coded value, doesn't matter. But those values are going to be fixed for parameters. But for variables, it will keep changing as per your execution results. Okay, you can use dynamic parameters.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Clear, Murli?
Yes, Malaya, clear.
Next, difference between tumbling and the schedule trigger. You know, right? Schedule used for clockwise, whereas tumbling trigger used for backfill or dependency cases. You understood? For tumbling trigger, we are going to use for backfill or dependency cases. Try to understand. Okay. Right. Next, how pipeline works? Remember, pipeline connects the source and collects the info and perform the transformation, then store it in DB or whatever based on your configuration. Pipeline is basically contains the activities. Okay, activities are going to be, you can call it as a one process. What is that process? It can be transformation, can be simple copy activity. Inside this, you are going to have a data sets, okay, which you are going to transform this data. You are simply going to copy this data, but to access this data again, you are going to connect to the different sources. So that's why connect to the source and then collect the data. On the data, we are going to perform the transformation. After transformation, store it in a DB. To do all these things, we are going to use a pipeline. So pipeline is going to work like connecting to source, collecting the data, performing the transformation, and storing data in a DB. That's how pipeline will work. Okay, next. What is Polybase and where did you use it in ADF? It's very performant way to load data from Azure storage to Azure Synapse. It does require going through a handful of steps. Like, see, basically whatever data you have in Azure storage, that data, if you want to read it from Azure Synapse, we need to do following things. We need to create a master key, then database scoped credentials. Okay, master key. Master key basically, why we need to use master key is we have a data Azure Synapse credentials. To encrypt those credentials, you need to provide your own key. Whatever key you have given with your own key, database keys will be encrypted again. Second, now what you are trying to do? You are trying to read data from storage into your data warehouse. So for that, first we need to have a data Azure storage credentials. Okay, database scoped credentials means Azure storage credentials I will store. Then external data source. Data source means I have a connection. I can able to connect to the Azure storage. But now which folder I should be able to read? So that external data source I need to define. Then I need to tell, okay, I connected to a particular folder. Now in that particular folder, what type of file I want to read, what type of file I'm expecting file format, whether it is CSV, Parquet, ORC, you need to tell. Finally, you need to create external table, meaning based on the file schema, you need to create external table. Then you are going to read that particular storage data into your Azure Synapse. Once you load, once you read it, then you are going to write it into your internal table, or you can say manage tables from those storage. So this is all steps we need to do. Just to avoid all these things, we have something called Polybase, which is going to do all those things internally. See, Polybase can be used with plain TSQL, but ADF can also do Polybase load, hiding the underlying steps like creation of external data source, external tables, extra, meaning creation of all those things. ADF is going to hide for us. Okay, ADF is going to do all these things internally for you. You just have to use Polybase option just to do all these steps internally. Okay, once you do all these steps, automatically we can able to read data from Azure storages into Azure data warehouse. From Azure data warehouse, I can able to read data which is there in a blob storage, data lake storage in one, data lake storage in two. From any storage, you can have a data, but that data I can able to read it from Azure SQL data warehouse. Okay. Next. What is IR and types of IR? It is also very, very important interview question. The integration runtime is the compute infrastructure used by Azure Data Factory to provide the following data integration capabilities across different network environments. We already learned something called what is that? Azure integration runtime. Then we talked about something called self-hosted IR, SSIS IR. Why we are using those things, we will see. Data Factory offers 3 types of integration runtime, and you should choose the type of IR that best serve the data integration capabilities and network environment needs you are looking for. These are the three types. One is Azure. Azure IR you are going to use to copy data from cloud to cloud. Self-hosted IR you can use to copy data from cloud to cloud, on-premise to cloud, cloud to on-premise. Everything we have seen, everything we have seen. Okay. Next, Azure SSIS to execute SSIS packages. We are going to use the Azure SSIS IR. Okay. Next, what is high availability of integration runtime? What is high availability of integration runtime? Remember, high availability of integration runtime we have seen already this one. Can anybody remember? Can you tell me what is high availability of IR? Okay, instead of installing your IR in a single mission, we have installed a IR in 2 missions. Why we have done that? Even if one mission is down, you will have another mission to serve your data integration capabilities. Okay, let's see now. If we install IR in multiple nodes, that is called high available IR. If one node is down, still we'll have another node to execute your pipeline. So the probability of failing both nodes is very, very less. Okay, so this is very important. So if you don't want to fail your pipelines at any cost, then you can maintain the high availability. Okay. Next, what is the advantage of auto resolve integration runtime, or you can say default IR? Why we need to use this? What is the advantage? There is a special advantage of auto resolve integration runtime. You try to understand. IR is to, let's say I have a Azure IR which is created in a east to west. Means infrastructure is provisioned in east to west, meaning this computer, this infrastructure will be provisioned in east to west data center to copy data from any location to any location. Doesn't matter location from where to where you are copying. But let's say if you're using auto resolve IR, means infrastructure is provisioned in sync location. Sync location means, example, if I'm copying from India to US, US is my target. Sync is nothing but US. If I'm copying data from India to Singapore, Singapore is my sync. So at sync location, my infrastructure will be launched. See, to copy data from any location to South India. South India is my sync. So IR will be in South India, meaning your infrastructure will be in South India. It will be more performance, will get better performance for copying data. So second example, to copy data from any location to east to west. If you select your sync is east to west, IR will be in east to west. Location will be resolved automatically. Auto resolved IR means location will be resolved automatically based on your sync location. Okay. Next, region will decide at runtime, which gives better performance. Okay, region will be decided at runtime, which will give better performance. Next, how to connect to on-premise from ADF? How to connect to on-premise from ADF? You know, we need to install the self-hosted IR in on-premise machine, then register with ADF key. Okay, this is the first thing. Second thing is we need to use the self-hosted IR in linked service when we are connecting to on-premise. When we are connecting to on-premise, we need to use this self-hosted IR which we have installed and registered. This IR we need to use in a linked service when we are connecting to on-premise. So these two steps we need to follow to connect to the on-premise. It may be SQL Server, it may be a file system, it can be anything in the on-premise. Okay, next. Can we link multiple data factory using a integration runtime? Can we link? Can I use same IR in multiple data factory? That is the question. Is it possible or not possible?
Yes, it's possible, Maya.
Yes, we discussed this one as well. So you need to do this. We need to do two things. One is, yes, it is possible. We can grant permission from base ADF to another ADF to use IR. Example, I have ADF one which is having a IR. This IR I want to use it in ADF 2. Then from ADF 1 you need to give the permissions to ADF 2 to use this IR. Okay, that is the first permissions you need to do. Second one, you need to create a linked IR. It's a basically when you select a IR, you need to select something called linked IR. You need to create a linked IR in new ADF. That is nothing but a ADF2. Inside ADF2, you need to create the linked IR. These two steps we need to follow. Next, steps to copy multiple tables from SQL Server to ADLS Gen 2. What you need to do? First, store table list in metadata table. Then you use lookup activity. So we are going to use a lookup activity we can use to read metadata. I will use lookup activity to read that metadata where we have a list of tables. Then I will use for each activity which will iterate through collection of tables one by one table. It will give if you want 50 tables at a time, it will give, because we have a batch and you have a batch and sequence, both we discussed. Okay, by default is it a batch or is it a sequence? By default is it a batch or sequence? This I have explained in detail. By using batch, by default it's a batch. Okay, don't worry. It's a copy activity. So inside it for each I need to use copy activity which will copy data from SQL Server to ADLS Gen 2. So these are the activities I'm going to use to copy data from SQL Server to the ADLS Gen 2. But we have optimized this particular pipeline. Inside for each we are using get metadata activity to check whether table is available or not. If it is available, it will return exist parameter equal to true. That parameter we are verifying by using if activity. Inside if activity we are using copy activity. Okay, all these things we have done. Next, difference between SCD1 and SCD2. You remember, SCD1 stores only current records. SCD2 store history plus current records. Remember, friends. Okay. Next, I have 10 folders and each folder is having a different number of files. How to implement pipeline to append Cloud Pandit as prefix to all files in all folders? Example, you have folder 1 to folder 10. So in each folder, I have a folder 1, file 1, folder 1, file 2, folder 1, file 3, something like that. In each folder, we have a number of files. Now, what I need to do for all the file names, I need to say Cloud Pandit underscore whatever file name I have. Cloud Pandit underscore whatever file name it has. Cloud Pandit, I want to paste it. Now, what you need to first for each you need to use to iterate through all the folders. Inside for each you need to use another for each to iterate through the files. But nested for each is possible or not possible in ADF. Inside for each, can I use another for each? No.
No, Malay.
But in this situation, what I need to do? But situation I need nested for each. What I need to do? You forgot. Master and child pipeline we implemented. Okay, get folder information and pass folders folder by folder using for each activity. I will pass the get metadata activity is going to give the all folders list. This folder list I will pass it to the for each. For each is going to give me one by one folder. Okay, get all files from each folder with another for each. With another for each activity, I need to get the one by one file. Okay. Now we need to use nested for each, which won't support in ADF. You understood? We need to use nested for each, which won't support in ADF. But I need to use a nested for each for this requirement, but that is not supported in ADF. But what we need to, for workaround, we have to implement a master-child relationship between pipelines. We created a master pipeline, we created a child pipeline. So to master pipeline, from master pipeline, we are getting the folder information. These folder names one by one we are passing to the child pipeline. Inside child pipeline, again I'm going to use another for each, which is going to read each folder. It will just go inside each folder and it will get the all files. Okay, so that's how we have done all these things. Okay. Now, how to get latest files from storage when we don't have any information on file name? How to get latest files from storage when we don't have any information on file name? You remember we have done this as well. So get all files using get metadata activity. Using for each, add all files to array variable with a append variable activity. Then get last item from array. Then we need to get the last item from the array. So that's how we have implemented the pipeline get metadata for each. So inside for each, we are using append variable to add all the file names, and append variable. Then I have used something called outside of for each. I have used something called set variable activity to get the last item from the array. That is, the last item is nothing but a latest file which is arrived into the storage. Without any clue, we can able to do that. Okay, but in reality, people will give some clue. Okay, file name will end with the date or something. Next, how to copy data from REST API to AD Legend using pagination implemented. You remember, we have implemented this as well. Using linked service parameter, we have implemented this using linked service parameter, and using for each activity and copy activity, we have implemented this. We just refer the video for in detail explanation. Okay. Next, do we have connectors to Salesforce and Snowflake from ADF V2? And do we need to install self-hosted IaaS for connecting to Salesforce and Snowflake? Anybody can guess it and tell me, is it possible to connect to the Salesforce and Snowflake from ADF V2 or not? Yes, it is possible. Next, do we need to install self-hosted IaaS for connecting to these sources? These are a cloud sources, you no need to install. That's what we have done. We have not installed self-hosted IaaS. See, yes, we have connectors, no need to install self-hosted IaaS. Yes, we have a connectors to Salesforce and Snowflake from ADF, and we no need to install self-hosted IaaS for connecting to the Salesforce and Snowflake. Okay. Next, what are the file formats you are processing? Okay, so all these are self-explanatory. What you can do, I have just given few more questions. I just noted down. You just take the questions based on whatever file formats you are using to practice. Okay, this is the answer you can give yourself. Next question, what are the different sources things connected from ADF? You can just explain whatever sources we connected. We connected to a lot of sources. What on-premise SQL Server, file system, REST API, Salesforce, Snowflake, and data lake storage Gen 1, Gen 2, Blob storage, SQL database, AWS S3, Cosmos DB. Okay, so many other sources we connected, right? So you just list down all those sources. Next, how to develop SD1, SD2 using data flow. So we have in detail like class, right? So you just note down those steps and explain here. Next, what are the activities used in pipeline? So whatever activities you have practiced, only mention those activities. Okay, only mention those activities. Okay, because these things I have not answered, because for everybody might have used different file formats, but we discussed most of the things. And activities, we discussed most of the activities, but whatever activities we have practiced, you just explain to the interview. Okay, that's all for today, and remaining part of the interview questions we will discuss in next weekend. Okay, clear friends? Okay, that's all for today, friends. Thank you.